The sound. That's what people don't tell you about getting old. It isn't the silence, it's the ticking. I'm sitting in my workshop right now. It's a small room at the back of a terrace house in Bristol. It smells like it always has, linseed oil, old brass, and the faint metallic tang of clockwork. There are 42 clocks in this room. Grandfather clocks that groan like old men waking up, delicate French carriage clocks with bells that sound like silver coins dropping on marble, and the little pocket watches, thousands of tiny, frantic heartbeats. I'm Alistair. I'm 88 years old, and I have spent my entire life fixing time, yet I've never been able to get a single second of it back. My hands aren't what they used to be. They've got these deep, wandering ridges, like a map of a country I don't recognize anymore. The skin is thin, like parchment paper. When I try to pick up a pair of tweezers to set a hairspring, my fingers shake. It's a cruel joke, really. A watchmaker who can't hold a steady hand. I have to brace my wrist against the edge of the mahogany bench, holding my lungs ache until my lungs ache just to place one tiny screw. Sometimes I just sit here. I don't even work. I just listen to the clocks. They aren't just counting the seconds. They're mucking me. Tick, gone. Tick, gone. People come to me because they want their memories to keep moving. They bring me their grandfather's watch or a mantel clock from a dead aunt and say, "Alistair, make it hum again, make it live." And I do. I strip the gears, I soak them in solvent, I oil the jewels, I give them back their time. But my own time stopped in 1966. I was 30. That's a good age, isn't it? You're old enough to know the rules, but young enough to think you can break them. I was working for a firm in London then. I was sharp. I was fast. I could take apart a Rolex chronograph and put it back together in the time it took most men to eat lunch. And then there was Clara. Even saying her name now feels like biting into something cold that makes your teeth ache. It's been nearly 60 years, and the name still has an edge to it. She worked at a bakery 3 doors down from the watch shop. Every morning she'd bring me a cinnamon roll, still warm, the sugar sticking to the wax paper. She smelled like yeast and vanilla, and that specific sharp scent of the rain hitting the London pavement. She was the kind of woman who looked at you and actually saw you. Not just the quiet watchmaker with grease under his fingernails. She saw the man who wanted to see the world. We had this plan. It was a mad plan, really. We were going to leave. Just leave. No more damp London basements. No more fixing things for people who didn't care. We were going to take the boat train to Paris, then down to Italy. I had a cousin in Florence who said he could get me work in a high-end shop. Midnight, she had said. Her eyes were that strange shade of green you only see in shallow water. September 14th, platform 4. If you aren't there, Alistair, I'm going anyway. I'm not spending another winter in this grey city. She wasn't joking. Clara was a fire. You either ran with her or you got burnt. I wake up at 6 a.m. I don't need an alarm. My body is a biological clock that's been wound too tight. The first thing I feel is the cold. It doesn't matter if the radiator is hissing or if I've got 3 blankets on. At 88, the cold lives inside your bones. It's a permanent resident. I sit on the edge of the bed for 5 minutes, waiting for my knees to agree to the idea of standing up. I make tea, Earl Grey, no sugar. I use the same chipped porcelain mug I've had since the 70s. I stand by the window and watch the world wake up. It's a different world now. People are always looking down at their palms, staring at those glowing glass rectangles. They're obsessed with time, but they don't respect it. They treat it like something to be killed, something to be filled with noise. They don't understand that time is a physical thing. It's a gear, it's a spring. If you overwind it, it snaps. If you don't oil it, it grinds to a halt. By 9 a.m., I'm in the shop. I don't take many customers now, just the regulars, the ones who know I'm slow. "Morning, Alistair," they say, speaking a bit too loudly as if my ears have quit on me. They haven't. I hear everything. I hear the floorboards creaking. I hear the dust settling. "Morning," I mutter back. I don't like small talk. Small talk is just a way to avoid saying the things that matter. I spent most of yesterday working on a 1920s pocket watch. It's a beautiful thing. 18-karat gold, white enameled dial, but the mainspring is shattered. It's a jagged piece of steel, useless and broken. As I looked at it through my loupe, I felt a familiar heaviness in my chest. That's me, a broken mainspring. I think about that night in 1966 every single hour. People say that memories fade, but they're lying. The bad ones, they don't fade. They just get sharper. They get polished by the constant rubbing of your thoughts until they're bright and lethal as a razor blade. I can still feel the weight of my suitcase in my hand. It was an old leather thing, scuffed at the corners. I had my tools in there, my best files, my finest oils, my favourite brass hammer, everything I owned. I had the ticket in my breast pocket. I kept touching it. I wanted to make sure it hadn't turned back into plain paper. It felt like a passport to a different life. A life where I wasn't just Alistair the watchmaker, but Alistair the man who lived. It was raining that night, a miserable, thin drizzle that got under your collar and made your skin feel clammy. I walked to the station, Victoria Station. It was a cathedral of iron and steam back then. The smell of coal smoke was so thick you could taste it on the back of your throat. I stood under the giant clock in the concourse. I looked up at it. 11:30 p.m. I had 30 minutes. My heart was doing something strange. It wasn't beating, it was fluttering, like a trapped bird hitting its wings against a cage. I felt sick. Not the kind of sick where you want to throw up, but the kind where you feel like your soul is trying to exit through your pores. "What are you doing?" a voice said in my head. "You're a watchmaker from the East End. You don't go to Italy. You don't know the language. You'll starve. You'll fail. She'll realize you're nothing special, and she'll leave you in a city where you can't even ask for a glass of water." It was the voice of my father, a man who had worked in the same factory for 40 years and died 2 weeks after they gave him a plastic pen for his service. "Stay in your lane, Alistair," the voice whispered. "Safe is better than sorry." I looked at the platform. Platform 4. I saw her. She was standing by a pillar. She was wearing a bright red coat, the only splash of color in that gray, smoky cavern. She had her hair tucked under a beret. She looked like a movie star. She looked like the future. She kept looking at her watch, a watch I had timed for her myself. I knew exactly what the second hand was doing. I knew it was sweeping toward midnight with an agonizing, mechanical indifference. I took a step toward her, and then I stopped. The fear wasn't a sudden thing. It was like a leak in a dam. It started small, just a drip of doubt, and then suddenly the whole wall gave way. I couldn't breathe. The station felt too big. The steam from the engines felt like it was choking me. I thought about my workbench. I thought about the familiar smell of the shop. I thought about the certainty of my life.
It was a small life, yes, a quiet life, but I knew where the walls were. I knew I wouldn't fall. Outside on that platform, there were no walls. There was just the dark and the unknown. I saw her check her watch again. She looked anxious. She paced a little, her heels clicking on the wet concrete. She looked toward the gates, searching for my face. I hid. I actually stepped back behind a newsstand. I'm 88 years old, and I still feel the shame of that movement. A grown man hiding behind a rack of newspapers because he was afraid of being happy. I watched her from the shadows. I watched the minute hand of the big clock creep to the 12. The whistle blew, that long, mournful sound that signals the end of something. The conductor shouted. The doors started to slam. Bang, 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 like a firing squad.
Clara stood by the open door of a carriage. She was frantic now. She was leaning out, looking up and down the platform. The train began to hiss. The giant pistons groaned. She had to make a choice. I actually prayed that she would stay. I wanted her to give up on me and stay on that platform so I could walk out and say I was late. I wanted her to make it easy for me. I wanted her to be a coward too. But she wasn't. She took one last look at the empty platform, her face crumbling for just a second. Then she straightened her red coat, lifted her chin, and stepped into the carriage. The train began to move, slowly at first, a rhythmic chugging that vibrated in the floorboards beneath my feet. I watched the windows slide past, one by one, faster and faster, and then I saw her. She was sitting by the window. She wasn't crying. She was just staring straight ahead, her reflection ghosted against the glass. I stood there, hidden behind the papers, and I watched the red taillights of that train disappear into the London fog. I didn't move for an hour. I went home. I went back to my room. I put my suitcase under the bed. I didn't unpack it for 3 years. The next morning I went to work. I fixed a clock. I fixed another one. I drank my tea. I lived my safe life. But here is the secret I've carried for nearly 60 decades, the thing that makes the ticking in this room so unbearable tonight. I didn't just stay behind that night. I died. The man who could have been Alistair, the man who lived in Florence, the man who woke up next to the woman in the red coat, he went on that train. He lived. I'm just the clockwork remains.
And tonight, the clocks are louder than usual, because today I received a letter that's been searching for me for a very long time. My hands are shaking so hard I can barely hold the envelope. The return address is from a legal firm in Italy. I think the train has finally come back to the station, and I'm terrified to see what's inside. The envelope sat on my workbench for 3 hours. I tried to work, I really did. I took a small brass gear from a carriage clock, a beautiful piece of craftsmanship from the 1890s, and I placed it in the ultrasonic cleaner. I watched the bubbles dance around the metal, stripping away a century of grime, but my eyes kept darting back to that cream-coloured paper. The return address was embossed: Studio Legale Rossi, Firenze. Lawyers. When you're 88, a letter from a lawyer usually means one of two things: someone wants your money or someone has died. In my case, I didn't have much of the former, and I had already spent a lifetime mourning the latter. I picked up my letter opener. It's an ivory-handled thing, smooth from decades of use. My breath was coming in short, shallow hitches. My chest felt tight, that old familiar ache, like a rusted hinge trying to turn. I sliced the top. The paper inside was thick, heavy. It wasn't just a legal notice. There was a smaller envelope tucked inside, yellowed with age, and a photograph. I didn't look at the small envelope first. I looked at the photo. It was a woman. She was sitting at an outdoor cafe, the kind with the green metal chairs you see in every Italian postcard. She was older, maybe in her 60s. Her hair was silver, pulled back in a loose, elegant bun. She was laughing, looking at something just off camera, and around her neck, hanging from a simple gold chain, was a small silver pocket watch.
I knew that watch. I'd spent 40 hours engraving the back of it with a pattern of ivy leaves. It was Clara. The letter from the lawyer was brief, cold, professional. To Mr. Alistair Finch, we regret to inform you of the passing of Clara Moretti, formerly Clara Vance. As per her final instructions, this correspondence was to be delivered to you upon the settlement of her estate. She was gone. She had been gone for 2 months. I sank into my stool. The room felt like it was spinning, not fast, but a slow, sickening tilt, like a ship taking on water. I had spent 59 years wondering where she was, imagining her in 100 different lives. And all that time, she had been out there, breathing the same air, seeing the same moon. And now, the world was empty of her. I reached for the smaller, yellowed envelope. My name was written on the front in her handwriting. It hadn't changed. It was still loopy, hurried, the A in Alistair leaning forward as if it were in a rush to get to the next letter. I opened it. Dear Alistair, I waited until the very last second. I think I even saw you, or the ghost of you, behind the newsstand. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump off the train and drag you by the collar into the carriage. But I knew if I did, you'd hate me for it. You would have spent the rest of your life blaming me for the things you lost, instead of blaming yourself for the things you were too afraid to take. I lived the life we talked about, Alistair. It wasn't perfect. Italy was hard. I was lonely for a long time. But I never once regretted boarding that train. My only regret is that you spent your whole life fixing watches, yet you never learned how to make your own time move forward. I'm leaving you the watch. It still keeps perfect time. I never let anyone else touch the movement. Only you.
I dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor, landing near my heavy work boots. The cardiac event. That's what they call it when the heart fails. But there are different ways for a heart to fail. Mine didn't stop beating. It did something much worse. It finally, after 6 decades, admitted the truth. I began to howl. It wasn't a cry. It was a raw animal sound that tore out of my throat, vibrating through my thin ribs. I grabbed a glass jar of watch parts. Hundreds of tiny, delicate screws, and I hurled it across the room. Smash! The sound of the glass breaking was the loudest thing I'd heard in years. The screws scattered like metallic rain, disappearing into the cracks of the floorboards. "You coward!" I screamed at the empty room. "You pathetic, miserable coward!" I grabbed the edge of my workbench and heaved. The heavy oak didn't move much, but the tools rattled. My loop rolled off and shattered. My files clattered to the floor. I was 88 years old, and I was having a tantrum, because for the first time in my life, I couldn't hide behind the safety of my routine. The lie I had told myself for 59 years, that I had made the sensible choice, the adult choice, was stripped away. I hadn't been sensible. I had been terrified. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the shop. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my outburst. The clocks kept ticking. Tick, coward. Tick, coward. I thought about the night of the train. I went back there in my mind, but this time I didn't let myself hide behind the newsstand. I forced myself to feel the weight of the suitcase again. I forced myself to feel the cold rain. I realized then that my safe life had been a slow-motion suicide. I had spent 59 years in this shop. I had fixed thousands of clocks. I had eaten the same breakfast, walked the same route, spoken to the same 3 neighbors. I had avoided risk. I had avoided pain. But in avoiding pain, I had avoided everything else too. I looked at my hands in the moonlight filtering through the shop window. They were the hands of a man who had spent his life looking at tiny things under a magnifying glass. My world was only 3 inches wide. I had missed the mountains. I had missed the Italian sun. I had missed the sound of Clara's voice in the morning. I had missed the chance to be a father, to be a husband, to be a man who actually did something, rather than just observing the passage of time. The physical pain was immense. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and was twisting my heart like a wet rag. My joints ached. My head throbbed. I thought about the watch she had sent back, the one I had engraved. I found it in the packing material. It was wrapped in silk. I held it in my palm. It was warm, strangely warm, as if it had been holding on to the heat of her skin all the way from Florence. I pressed it to my ear. Steady, rhythmic, perfect. I had built that movement to last 100 years. I had used the finest oils, the most precise balance wheel. I had put all my love and all my hope into that little silver circle, and then I had handed it to her and stayed behind. I had sent my heart on the train, but I had kept the body in London. "I'm sorry," I whispered. My voice was a dry rasp. "Clara, I'm so sorry."
The silence of the shop was the heaviest thing I'd ever felt. It was the silence of a life that had left no mark. If I died right there on the floor of my shop, the only thing that would change is that the clocks would eventually stop. No one would miss the man. They'd just miss the repairman. I thought about my father's plastic pen. I thought about my own life. Is this it? Is this how it ends? An old man in a room full of clocks, realizing he never actually lived a single minute of the time he was given? I felt a sudden sharp spike of anger, not at Clara, not even at the past, at the man I was right now. I'm 88. I don't have much time left. Maybe a year, maybe a month, maybe an hour. But the clocks were still ticking, and as long as they were ticking, the mainspring hadn't fully unwound yet. I stood up. It took everything I had. My back screamed. My knees popped. I had to use the workbench to pull myself to my feet. I looked at the letter. I looked at the photo of Clara. She had lived. She had dared. And even in her death, she was reaching out to me, trying to wake me up. I looked at the mess on the floor, the scattered screws, the broken glass. "Not yet," I said. It was the first time I'd spoken with any strength in years. "It's not over yet." I walked over to my desk. I found a piece of paper and a pen. My hands were still shaking, but I forced them to be still. I used the watchmaker's grip, the one that had never failed me when things were delicate. I began to write. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time since 1966, I wasn't looking for a newsstand to hide behind. I was looking for the door.
But first, there was something I had to do, something I should have done a lifetime ago. I picked up the silver watch. I took a small screwdriver. I opened the back, and there, tucked inside the inner casing, where only a watchmaker would ever look, I saw it. A tiny piece of paper folded into a microscopic square. I pulled it out with my tweezers. My heart was thundering now. I unfolded it. It was a train ticket, dated September 14th, 1966, Victoria Station to Paris. She had bought my ticket. She had held on to it for 59 years. The breath left my body in a long, shaky sigh. She hadn't just waited at the station. She had waited her entire life for me to show up. and I was 59 years late. I didn't pack a suitcase this time. At 88, you realize you don't actually need much. A few pills for the heart, a warm coat, and the silver watch. That's all. I left the shop exactly as it was. The 42 clocks were still ticking, but I didn't wind them. I let them run down. I wanted them to stop. I wanted the silence to reclaim that room, to wash away the decades of counting seconds that led nowhere. I took a taxi to Victoria Station. It's different now. It's all bright lights, glass, and fast food chains. The smell of coal smoke is gone, replaced by the scent of burnt coffee and floor wax. The people are different too. They're in such a rush. They're running toward their futures, but most of them look like they're trying to escape them. I walked to platform 4. My legs were heavy. Each step felt like I was wading through deep water. I stood by a steel pillar, not the same one maybe, but close enough. I looked at the spot where the newsstand used to be. There was no one hiding there. Not anymore.
I looked at the digital clock on the wall. The numbers flickered in harsh, cold red. No gears, no heart, just math. I reached into my pocket and touched the ticket from 1966. It was fragile, like a dead butterfly's wing. Beside it sat a modern ticket, a one-way trip to Florence. The doctor would say I'm a fool. He'd say my heart can't take the altitude, the travel, the stress. But my heart has already survived the worst thing a heart can endure. It survived being ignored. I'm going to see her grave. I'm going to find the cafe with the green chairs. I'm going to sit in the sun and feel the warmth that I denied myself for 60 years. It's a small victory, a pathetic one maybe, but it's the only one I have left. I'm looking at you now. I know how you feel. You think you have time. You think that no is the safe answer. You think that by staying still, you're protecting yourself. You're waiting for the right moment, the moment when you have more money, more confidence, more certainty. Let me tell you something about certainty. It's a lie. I'm 88 years old, and the only thing I'm certain of is that the things you don't do will rot you from the inside out. Fear doesn't just go away. If you don't face it, it just moves in. It sits in your favorite chair. It eats at your table. Eventually, it becomes your only companion. I've spent 59 years fixing the most delicate machines on Earth. I can tell you exactly why a watch stops. It's usually a piece of dust, a tiny microscopic speck of grit that gets into the gears. At first, the watch keeps running. You don't even notice. But then the friction builds, the gears grind, and one day the whole thing just stops.
I've met a lot of people in my shop. I've seen them grow old. I've seen them lose their partners, their health, their dreams. And not one of them, not a single soul, ever stood at my counter and said, "Alistair, I really wish I'd stayed at the office more," or "I'm so glad I played it safe." They all talk about the trains they didn't board. They talk about the girl they didn't talk to, the business they didn't start, the apology they didn't send because their pride was too heavy to lift. They're all haunted, just like me. You think the pain of rejection is bad? You think the pain of failing is hard to swallow? Try the pain of what if. What if is a poison that takes 60 years to kill you. It's a slow, cold ache. It's watching the red coat step onto the train while you hide behind the newspapers, and then spending the rest of your life wondering what her hair smelt like in the Italian sun. Don't be me. I'm an old man in a nice coat, and I am telling you, board the train. It doesn't matter if you're scared. Board it anyway. It doesn't matter if you don't know where it's going. The destination isn't the point. The point is the act of stepping off the platform. The point is the refusal to be a ghost while you're still breathing. If you love someone, tell them. Today, not when you're ready. Tell them while the words are still hot in your mouth. If there's a life you want to live, start it. Now, not when you have the perfect plan. The plan will never be perfect. The weather will never be right. Look at your hands. I don't care if they're 20 years old or 60. Look at them. They're moving. The blood is flowing. The mainspring hasn't snapped yet. Do you hear that? That's the sound of your life ticking away. It's the most beautiful and terrifying sound in the world.
The train to Paris is pulling in now. I can hear the hum of the electric engine. It's not as romantic as the steam and the coal, but it's moving. I'm standing up. My knees ache. My chest is tight. But for the first time in my life, I don't care. I'm reaching into my pocket. I'm taking out the silver watch. I'm looking at the ivy leaves I engraved when I was a young man in love. I'm not a watchmaker anymore. I'm just a traveler. I'm going to walk through those gates. I'm going to show them my ticket, and I'm going to sit by the window. When you finish watching this, I want you to do one thing. Don't leave a comment. Don't like this. Don't just move on to the next video to kill another 10 minutes of your life. I want you to close your eyes and think about your platform 4. Think about the person, the place, or the dream you've been hiding from. And then I want you to go to them. Don't wait until you're 88. Don't wait until all you have left is a letter and a ghost. The train is leaving. Are you on it, or are you still hiding behind the newsstand? The choice is yours, but remember, the clock is always ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Go.